Welcome back to the channel, guys. This video we are going to be doing a buyer's guide on a Nissan GTR, the R35, like the one I've got behind me. I'm just going to go through a few things with the car. I'm going to start on the outside, go into the inside, and then have a look underneath mechanically on what, the main things are to look for when you are buying one of these cars. Obviously, it's a big investment for you, so you want to know the things to look out for and the common problems. So this car, like I say, it's a 70 plate GTR, so it's a 2020 car, which is the latest version of the car. They do three main differences on the cars. 2009 to 2010 is called the CBA, and then they do a DBA, which is 2011 to 2016, and then they did the latest facelift, which is they call it an EBA, which is basically 2017 to present day. They actually stopped making them in 2022. So this is one of the latest cars available to buy. This particular car is for sale with my sister company, 80 Performance Cars. It is just sold actually. So someone's picking it up at the weekend. This is a very clean example of a EBA car. It's a car we've looked after from new actually. So this particular car has only got 1,500 miles on it, and it is 3 years old. So it's a very, very clean car. We've looked after it from new, so we know that it's a very mechanically sound car. It's hardly done any mileage, and we've always serviced it, and we've also done our stage modifications on it. So things to look out for if we are starting outside with the bodywork. Typically on these cars, so if we're thinking about cars that could be up to, I guess if it's a 2009 car, they could be up to sort of 13, 14 years old now. So Japanese paint, that's one big thing. They're very known for having really thin paint, especially the GTRs. They don't put layers and layers of paint on it like the German cars. So they are prone to stone chips. I would say the main points are obviously on the front end of the car. We'll have a look at that in a minute, but also if you come around the rear arches, they've got a real thin lip, and they're all metal, and they don't have any protection on them. This car's got PPF on it in the pronounced places, but you do sometimes see the chipping on the arches, and obviously that can cause corrosion over time. Something to look out for is corrosion on the rear arches. Wheels, tyres and brakes, that's a common thing. Sort of general bit of knowledge really for any car buying. Look out for the condition of the tyres. Obviously, if we were selling a car as a trader, we like to make sure there's good 3.5 mil on the tyres. So that's approximately half of the wear tread left on it. These cars, the GTRs, they come with run flats from new. So this car's still on its first set of tyres because it's only done 1,500 miles. My advice would be, if you are going to own one of these cars, is to actually change the tyres from a run flat to a Michelin Pilot Super Sport or a Pilot Sport 4S. They are the go-to tyre because the run flat tyres make it quite a firm ride, and they do actually make the car tramline a bit, pull you over the road. So like I say, this car's only done 1,500 miles, so there's no point in us changing the tyres just to sell it, because there's obviously a good amount of tread on this one. But a good thing to do is get your head under the car, have a look on the inside of the tyres, because these cars are quite heavy on tyres, and they do wear, generally speaking, the inside of the tyre first. So it's always good. If you look at the outside, you probably see there's a bit of tread. There's probably more tread on the outside of the tyre than there is on the inside. So always get your head underneath, have a good look on the inside, because they will wear on the inside first. Wheels, check the condition, make sure there's no cracks, buckles, scratches. Because they're diamond cut wheels, they're a little bit more expensive to refurb than a solid colour. Probably expect to pay between 80 and 100 quid for a 20-inch diamond cut alloy to get that refurbished. And then brakes, again, check the brake condition. I'll go into the brakes a little bit more in depth when we're up on the ramp with the car, but they come with standard drilled Brembo discs. If the car's been modified at all, sometimes people get rid of the drilled discs and they put on upgraded AP discs or Alcon discs, normally like a J hook or a C hook disc. That gets away with the drilled discs. Again, this car didn't need brakes, but it had the upgrade, because when you are pushing the car a bit harder, getting a bit heat into it, the drilled Brembo discs tend to crack from the drilled holes. It's a common thing on these cars, so something to look out for. It's always good to get a car that has got the upgraded discs on. It's nice to get away from sorry, there's a lorry going by. It's nice to get away from the drilled discs, especially if the car's a little bit older, because the holes fill up with brake dust and they also retain the heat, causing them to crack. So upgraded discs is a big one. Again, on all four corners you are looking at obviously the consumables. So you've got the brakes. Roughly speaking, it's about £1,000 to £1,500 per axle to change the brakes if you're doing discs and pads. So it's quite a big spend. So you want to make sure the discs haven't got big lips on them, the brake pads aren't wearing too thin, and also the tyres. Again, full set of tyres for the Michelins is about 1,200 quid fitted, and then you've got wheel alignment, that sort of thing. So you could quite easily, if you got a car you bought and it needed brakes and tyres, you could be into a good 2 to 3 grand's worth of spend before you've actually got it to where it needs to be. So tyres and brakes are obvious, but they are obviously a lot more expensive on bigger cars, bigger wheels like this car. Front end wise, like I said about the stone chips, quite a lot of these cars now are getting PPF. This particular car has got PPF on quite a lot of the panels. Front end on the GTRs is important because, like I say, the paint's thin and they're quite prone to chipping and being vulnerable. So front end PPF, check the headlights as well. Again, if the front paintwork's chipped, 9 times out of 10 you'll have little chips in the headlights as well, and potentially the windscreen. So give the paintwork a good look at, and also inspect the windscreen. Check that it's not got any big chips in it, because it's got sensitive rain sensors in the windscreen for the wipers. It can be an expensive windscreen to replace, so make sure that's not too chipped. Again, prone areas like wing mirrors as well, and the rear quarters for stone chipping, so have a good look over that. Older cars, they did suffer from corrosion on the doors and below the wing mirrors. I'll just show you where to look for. I haven't actually got an older car in at the moment, so this car's not got it, but if you look inspect along the seams where this little plastic piece is for the door trim, sometimes underneath there and around the bottom of the mirror you will see like bubbling of corrosion. Because it's an aluminium door, it gets aluminium oxidization under the paint, and it can cause bubbling of the paintwork. And there is a bit of a myth with these cars that when they were built in the factory, there's a robot that picks the door up in 2 particular places, and what it does, it takes like the galvanization off of the door in certain places. So along the bottom of the door on the front corner, this car's obviously fine, so I can't show you, but always look along the sill of the door for corrosion as well, because there's basically 2 particular places where the robot picks the door up, and it's under the front of the door, and it's on top of the rear of the front door. So basically check the front doors for corrosion, round the mirrors, round the bottom of the door, top of the door there, and then round this bit of plastic here, which is ever so important, because Nissan were doing it under warranty because they knew it was a fault, but I think the age of the cars now, some of the older cars, they won't touch them because they're certain gone past that point. I think they had like a 5-year paint protection. Yeah, that's really the bodywork: wheels, tyres, brakes. If the car's tuned, it's probably a little telltale sign if these cars are tuned and running rich, is you might often see the back of a GTR has staining on the paintwork, because the exhausts are quite pronounced, and if they are tuned, especially if they have the cats taken out of them, you can get quite a lot of black smoke from these cars. And yeah, you can check the back of the car. I mean, this car's being cleaned and ceramic coated, but as a rule this was pretty tidy anyway. There was no sort of staining on the paint, but just check that, because last thing you want to go down the road with a tuned car and it bellowing out black smoke, which was a known thing like back in the day on some of the early maps of the cars. So if it has got an Ecutech tune on it, try and check what version the Ecutech is on as well, because the latest version now is version 8, and they have refined that map nicely now, so it's not actually as smoky as some of the first maps. But that's something just to look out for when you do a test drive, is obviously when you get it warmed up, accelerate hard, check in the rear view mirror, make sure there's not a lot of black smoke, and that is basically just on a tuned car without the cats. So a car in standard form, you shouldn't see anything at all. So we'll head inside, have a little look at the interior. So one of the first things you do is obviously get in the car, you unlock the car. Always good to check you're getting 2 keys with the car. These keys are very expensive to buy. If you're going to buy one, get it coded to the car. It's going to cost you in and around £350 to get that done. So it's well worth checking the key actually works as well. There may be 2 keys, but make sure they do both unlock the car as well, because if it don't, someone may have just bought a dummy from eBay or something, and it may not have the coding on the car, which is a part of the expense basically when it's getting programmed. Also check the key blade. You can see the little holes in there, so that key has been cut, and that has been cut to the car. If the key hasn't been cut and it's not a cloned key, sorry, a key off eBay or something like that, they may have just got it so you've got a key, but then that potentially won't work. So just make sure the key's been cut and it does work in the door handles. So yeah, 2 keys is important. Check the mileage, obviously, on the dash of the car. Make sure that relates to the service history, the service book, and also if it's the car's a few years old, it will have some MOT history as well. So always good to do an online check the MOT history, have a look at the previous advisories, see what may have been flagged up on the last MOTs. It's always good to check the chassis number against the logbook. On these cars, the chassis number is in lots of places in the car. Most cars have it in 1 or 2 places, but these cars actually have it on most of the panels. So even on the bumpers, doors, has it on the dash. Yeah, everywhere you look, basically, there is a chassis number on the panels and the parts, because obviously they're known for potentially getting stolen and parts being sold off. So that's one thing to look out for. So this is an eBay car, 2020 car, so the dash is a little bit different. The interior is slightly more refined. Lovely place to be, these later cars. I would say things to check for on the earlier cars, so say 2009 to 2015, 16, they did suffer from the stereo controls. They were quite intermittent. So if you got one that was quite worn, then you'd have like a lot of control on the steering wheel that didn't actually work. Mainly the volume on the head unit. So check the volume on the head unit works, because sometimes it's intermittent and it won't go up and down as you turn the knob on the stereo. And that could be a fairly expensive change if you need to change out the control unit on the head unit, or it could be just a contact on the back of the button, which is also a common fix, quite an easy fix. So yeah, depending on what the fault is, but just basically check all the controls, check the stereo, make sure that all works. One other thing I will show you is, I'll just turn the ignition on. If you come and have a little look in here, check these buttons here. All GTRs have these buttons. So all these GTRs have like the transmission settings, suspension settings, and the traction control setting. Just check, press and hold that one down, you'll see it going to save, and then if you press and hold it up, it will go into race mode. Just check all those LED lights light up, because it's very common for that blue LED at the bottom not to light up, and that can sometimes mean this control unit goes down and the LED goes out. So that is, we see that quite a lot on these cars, something worth checking. Other thing to check, actually, we have had in the past, common failures, is the electric folding wing mirrors. So there's a little button just down here. You can switch the wing mirrors, open and close. Again, that's quite an expensive fix. If the mechanism goes down inside the mirror, then you're into buying basically a new unit, and they are a few £100s. So that's worth looking at. But other than that, generally speaking, have a look at the condition of the car, the seats, the interior. Some of this silver trim, especially on the early cars, it's a slightly different layout, and a lot of people just chuck their keys in there and they do get scratched up. It's not the end of the world. You can get it recoated, but it just makes the car look a little bit untidy. So that's something we always look out for when we are buying and selling these cars. We want it to look nice and fresh inside, so keep an eye out for general condition. And then when you do drive the car, run the car, keep an eye on all the gauges. If you have a look, there's so many settings on the dash that you can actually adjust and see and read different gauges. So you've got, you know, coolant temp, engine oil temp, transmission temp, oil pressure. There's all those four are probably the most important. Just make sure the car gets up to temperature, stabilizes, and doesn't throw any warning lights on, or any excessive temperature warnings. That's a good thing. If you do have diagnostic equipment, which I know not all of you have, but a good little tool is the Ecotech Bluetooth dongle. So if the car has been tuned on Ecotech, or you can plug in a USB dongle under there, sync it to your phone. There's an app on the phone, and it basically, you can read the historic fault codes, and you can also read the historic temperatures. So if there's any excessive transmission temperatures, or if there's any excessive engine oil temperatures, you can check all that. So that's quite useful. So yeah, do that. Also try and do a launch count if you have the use of a tool, a diagnostic dongle, or like an Ecotech dongle is, check the launch count, because it's nice to know if the car's been launched and how many times, if it has been. Just gives you a bit of an idea of what the potential life of was a car before you owned it. So that's always useful. So yeah, I think that's about it for the internal stuff and the electronics. We'll head into the workshop and we'll have a look underneath the car. Just before we take it into the workshop and get it up on the ramp, the good thing to do is when the car's warm on idle, just get out of the car and listen for a little rattling noise, because the bell housings on these cars, if you Google GTR faults, bell housing will be up there, not top three. It's a part of the transmission. The bell housing has a bearing in it, and it actually wears, and it causes a rattling noise. So when you experience it is when the car's warm, in idle, in neutral, just get out of the car, have a little listen, and then if you get to the middle of the car and just sort of stick your head down a little bit and listen out below the sort of sill of the door, you can normally hear a transmission rattle. But this car, as it's so new and low mileage, it hasn't got any noises at all. But I'll show you on the car when it's up in the air exactly what to look out for. But that's definitely a good thing to point out, because I'll give you my top 5 things in a little while at the end of the video to listen out for and look out for. But that is definitely up there. So I'll show you how to identify it on the ramp. So starting at the front, I would say under trays are one of the big things. They are in about 3 or 4 different pieces under the car, and they can be a real pain to remove during servicing if they do get really corroded and rusted. You see the boys at the back there, they're actually putting this one back on because it's just had a service. And one of the biggest things we come across in the workshop is the under tray bolts being rusty and corroded. So a nice little upgrade for yourselves and for us in the garage is to actually change the steel bolts to stainless steel. We install them full kit with plenty of copper slip, so they are really nice to change and to remove each time it gets serviced, because most services, every service includes doing this oil change in the engine, and that's one part of the under tray, and then every 3rd service is the gearbox transmissions fluids, which includes the rear section of the under tray, which are 2 big carbon fibre trays held on by loads and loads of bolts. So bolts and brackets on the under tray, they're a big thing, corrosion. The age of these cars now, some of the early ones, they are getting quite bad for the brackets. So when you undo the bolt, if they are seized in, it will twist the bracket up, sometimes snap the bracket. We do keep all the brackets in stock for that reason, and there's a couple of little upgraded stainless steel brackets we offer as well. So that's something, if you're viewing a car, around someone's house or with a trader, it's something you probably won't be able to see if they've all been changed, but you can put your head underneath the back end and you can see the bolts. You can see if they're stainless steel or not, and if they're rusty. So that's something to look out for. If they're not done, it's not the end of the world. We do the full bolt kit. It's about £75 to do that, and we can change them out when we're doing a service. So it's a nice little mod, cheap one, and it saves us in the garage a lot of time, and it will save you an expense if brackets start getting broken and things like that. So under trays is a big one. Brakes, I did mention the brakes on the video on the outside of the car. One thing you can't do when the car's on the floor is actually see the inside of the disc. So especially on the rear discs where they don't get as much use, you will come across sometimes that the inside of the disc does get quite rusty and more lipped than the outside of the disc. This car's got upgraded discs front and rear, so I can't really show you an example on this one, but it's something that may crop up in a service or when you're actually got your car up in the air. It's good to have a little look under there and look at the inside of the brakes. Coming along the car, exhaust. This is a fair example. This is an aftermarket exhaust. It's a 4-inch cap back. This car's at stage 2. Looking at it, it's still got the downpipes. It could be a stage 4, but you can see these aftermarket exhausts. They are great, but they can get corroded. You can see the flange on this Y pipe is looking a little. It's where it hits the ground basically, because it's a bigger diameter exhaust. They do sort of sit a bit lower. Can get caught on speed bumps. So exhaust system's a good thing to look out for. Again, there's so many options on the market, depending on what you want it to look like, what you want it to sound like. Options are endless with GTRs, and depending on what package you're going for, will determine what exhaust you want. But generally speaking, the standard exhaust is pretty good. They do get corroded. I've never seen any really fail. It's mainly like the aftermarket Y pipes that have problems, if anything. Moving to the back of the car, you can see now there's 2 big sections of the under tray. This car, if you have a little look up here, these bolts have been replaced with stainless steel. And this particular car has got our rear diffuser kit on it, which is nice. We fitted that a few years ago, again with all stainless steel bolts, so that's a nice little touch, but not every car's got them. It just makes it look a little bit more aggressive, which is good. Exhaust tips, again, this has got standard exhaust tips on, so you can have modified exhaust with the original tips on. This car's really well looked after, although it's driven here, a good few miles. The exhaust tips are quite clean. Sometimes tuned cars, they're really thick black soot on the back of the tips, and can be quite hard to clean up once they've got to a really bad stage. But yeah, generally speaking, I think the other thing I was going to show you was the bell housing, which we spoke about outside. But I thought I'd just show you why we're underneath the car, so you know exactly what we're talking about if you haven't seen one before. But up there, above the Y pipe, you've got this prop shaft here, and it's going into the bell housing is that section there. I don't know if you can see that there, but there's a bearing just behind there, and that's what has a bit of play in it. If you grab the prop shaft and move it up and down, you can hear a little noise there. I mean, there's going to be a certain amount of movement in it. But if you do up and down movement, and then if you do in and out, you can do that with like a pry bar and actually check the measurement. That's how we check it on our services. Actually, we pry it forward and back, and we check the measurement of the bearings. So it's a good telltale sign if you've got play in the bell housing. So like I say, it's a very common problem. We're replacing them quite often. On average, I would say the life expectancy of a standard one is about 30,000 miles. So if you're buying a car with around 30,000 miles on it, or coming up to that, then I would say have a look in the service history, see if it's been changed. You've got 2 options for changing it. You can either change it to a completely standard NISSAN part, which comes with bell housing and a new torque plate. The part alone is around the £2,000 mark, and it's the best part of 4 or 5 hours to fit it. Or you can go for a modified version, which we do. We have a modified bell housing with a modified bearing in it, and that is basically a strengthened bearing, which reduces the likelihood of the bearing failing and the likelihood of it having play. And those ones do have a long warranty on it, so you're almost guaranteed for that to see you out the life of the car once you get it changed. That job for the modified version, drive-in, drive-out service on a part exchange, is approximately £900 to £1,200. So it's considerably cheaper than buying just the brand new part, which is, like I say, about £2 grand. So I would always opt for that. The only downside to that is if your torque plate, the torque damper inside the bell housing has a failed spring or a failed plastic clip, which can happen, and that also can cause a bit of noise. But unfortunately, the only way to buy new ones of those is to buy the brand new bell housing from NISSAN. So it's a bit of a catch-22. We'll always remove it, check the bell housing and check the torque plate. If we think the torque plate's good to go, we'll always replace it with your original one, and advise you if we need to replace the actual torque damper, torque plate, and then you would be into potentially a new bell housing. But that happens very, very, it's not a big amount of times that we change them where it needs a torque plate. So normally 9 times out of 10 you're fine with the modified version we've got. Why we're under here, you can't actually see now, but the sump pan of the gearbox, which is just here. So when we do change the transmission oil, they are a steel sump pan. We do often change them because of corrosion, so they basically, the paint comes off the sump pan and they do start getting a bit corroded. Again, a modified version, we do an aluminium sump pan gasket, all the bolt kit, and that is a nice little modification because it has some nice cooling fins on it as well, and it will never rust because it's made from aluminium. So that is something to look out, or when you're getting your car serviced, ask the technician to have a little look at the sump, because we have seen them when they get quite bad and they start blistering and obviously thinning the metal, they can start weeping oil out of them. So that's the only other thing. So yeah, I think we're done underneath the car. I will get out from underneath the car and give you my 5 tips of what to look for. So earlier I mentioned about the tyres. This particular car we've just gone underneath is the owner of this car does quite a few track days, goes to Europe, Nürburgring and Spa. So he's opted for the big brake kit. I did mention about the upgraded discs. The next level up from an upgrade on just a standard size discs is the AP Radical brake kit, which I do rate and have first-hand experience with because I've actually had that on one of my own cars, front and rear. So massive rotors, big 6-pot calipers, and the stopping performance is phenomenal. Front brake kit is approximately £2,500 for that, and then the same again for the rear if you wanted it on the rear. What I was mentioning earlier on the tyres is this chap's gone for the Michelin. These are actually Pilot Super Sports, I believe, yeah. And another good modification to do is go to the oversized tyre. So the typical oversized tyre that we would recommend is a 265 on the front and a 305 on the rear. This one has gone one step further because he's doing track days. He has actually got on here a 285 on the front, and on the rear is a 315. Have a look at the rears. They are massive. They do fit the standard rim fine, but they do obviously fill it, and they're probably quite close to the arch, so you wouldn't want to lower this car because it would probably rub on the arch. But that is 335. That's huge. That's a really wide tyre, and that's probably as wide as I would go. But like I say, if it's just for normal road use, I would probably say 305 on the Michelins. And Michelin Pilot Sport 4Ss are the one to go for. You can go for Cup 2s, but they're a bit more track orientated. So yeah, a decent road tyres. First oversized tyre, and the Michelin's transforms the car. So that's the video coming to an end. I just wanted to recap that because I've given you quite a lot of information there in a short period of time. So I wanted to give you my top 5 things that I would look out for whilst buying a GTR, and I will go through them now briefly. I've gone through them earlier in a bit of detail, but first of all, it's probably service history. So I would check the service history book. They will all have a book in the glove box. There's a little manual, and it should have stamps in it. If it hasn't got stamps, you should see a receipt for that service. And whilst you're looking at the service history, it's good to check if it has had any other mechanical work done to it, for example, like the bell housing, that sort of thing, and any other repairs. So service history, check the stamps, check the service history invoices, and also it might be worth ringing the garage if it's been to a specialist, like for example us. If you get a service book out and it's got some auto torque stamps in it, feel free to pick the phone up. We're more than happy to have a look into the car for you, and we can give you our advice on potentially what condition it's in and if it's a good car. Whilst you're on the service history and looking at the car, like I said, if you did have a dongle, OBD Ecutech, to plug into it, you can check the historic fault codes, warnings on the car if there's any excessive temperatures reached, and also launch count is quite a nice one to know about. So service history being number 1. Brakes and tyres, like I said, it's a fair expense if you've got to shell out for them, you know, in your first few months of actually owning the car. So it's nice to get a car with Michelins on it that aren't the run flats, and also ideally a nice little modification at the same time is to go for the oversized tyres. Like I described, there's a couple of different options on the tyres, but again, if you want any advice, give us a call. We can talk through tyre sizes and prices on that. And brakes being the second thing. Ideally, if the car's had a set of brakes in its lifetime, it'd be nice if it's had an aftermarket set, like I say, AP or Alcon. I prefer AP. Alcon are sometimes prone to the bells cracking. They have aluminium bells. That's why I like to go for AP. They're a great performing disc, good price, probably turn out to be less than the original cost of the original equipment, and a decent brake pad in it. So yeah, ideally you get away from the standard brakes. If it has got standard brakes on it, check for hairline cracks around the drilled holes, and make sure you've got plenty of meat on the disc and on the pad, so you're not looking at an expense for those. Thirdly, most common problem on the GTR is probably the bell housing rattle. So like I said earlier, get it warm, give it a test drive, have a listen to the car, make sure it's up to temperature, in neutral and on idle, and then you'll hear it. If it is, you could probably sit in the car, just give it a slight rev and you'll hear the rattle come in and out. It's not the end of the world if it has got a bit of a rattle. These cars are quite mechanical, and they do they don't suffer from mechanical noises, but that's the nature of the car. They are quite mechanical. If you drove around in a car park on tight lock, you'll probably hear the diff sort of, clonking a little bit and just making some noises, which again is perfectly normal. But the bell housing is something that you want to try and avoid having to spend on. It'd be nice to get one that's already done, or low enough mileage that it doesn't need one. But again, that's something we can help you with. It's not the end of the world. It is a spend. You're into about, like I say, £1,000 to £1,200 to get that fixed. But just something you could avoid if you know about it before buying. And then lastly, number 4 and 5 points are probably the corrosion underside. You get the corrosion on the under trays we spoke about, the bolts, the brackets. Other than that is actual subframes. Some of the earlier cars, like I say, they get into sort of 10 years plus old, and you will start seeing some corrosion now on the subframes and on the rear sills of the car. So it'd be nice to get it inspected and actually see if you're into any sort of corrosion issues. Some cars now we are changing subframes, so we have actually changed rear subframes on these cars now because of corrosion issues. Very worst case scenarios are the subframes are made of sort of tubing, so they are sometimes can rust from the inside out, and they can put holes in the tube work, which obviously weakens the structure of the subframe, which then is a mechanical problem. You need to get that changed, but that is very bad, very worst case situation. But it all starts with a bit of surface rust, so the cleaner the underside the better to avoid that. And then the corrosion on the outside, check the doors, front doors, rear arches, any stone chips that happen on the paintwork, just check there's no bubbling of corrosion set in there. So that's key, very common on the early cars again. And then moving on to the last point was the bodywork. Sort of covered it just then, but mainly the stone chipping on the front end. If you're into painting the front end of a car, it depends what paint shop you use, but you could be in it, front bonnet, bumper, wings. You're into, easily £1,000 to get that painted from a decent body shop, maybe double that, depending on the level of work they do and the quality of their workmanship. So yeah, generally I think that's a good overview. So the 5 key things are service history, tyres and brakes, bell housing, corrosion, and bodywork. So hopefully that was helpful to you guys. Any questions, any comments, drop them below and we'll try to answer them to help you out. Also pick up the phone. I'm in the office 24/7 nearly. So yeah, feel free. I'm happy to talk through any issues, any concerns you may have with a potential purchase or even with your own car. Please check out our sister company, AT Performance Cars. We do sell GTRs. We offer cars for sale, and we also offer a buy-in service as well. So even if you have a car you want to sell, feel free to drop us a line. We're always interested in buying nice low mileage examples. We'll be happily help you out, whether we buy it from you or we can offer a sale and return service. So yeah, please head over to that site, atpcars.co.uk, and it shows all our services on there, from sale and return to buy-in to selling. We've also always got some nice vehicles there for sale. So yeah, take a look at that. So yeah, I think that's it for now. Thanks for watching. See you next time.